Probably heard me say on day one, a lot of geometry is memorization. So you got to get some things down so that we understand what we're talking about. The first thing we have here are undefined terms. They realized we couldn't have the good definitions for these things. The goal in geometry is to be deductive and reason to a logical conclusion. So because these things are hard to define, we call them undefined terms. A point is just a dot, and we use capital letters always for points. A line, well, you have 2 points you draw. Now, the thing to notice here is that a line can be named with a single lowercase letter. Now, you heard me say a second ago, points are always capital letters. This lowercase letter is not a point. It's the name for a line. It's like a shortcut. But typically, we use 2 points to name a line. So here, notice the line bar over it. We call this line XY or YX. It makes no difference. So a plane is an infinite flat surface. So like a piece of paper that goes on forever and ever in all directions. The coordinate plane, you might remember that from graphing and algebra. That's an infinite flat surface. You need 3 points to have a plane. And you don't want them on the same line, otherwise there could be more than one plane there. We'll talk about that later. Typically we use 3 points to name that line. Notice there's no bar over it. It's plane ABC, and you could name them in any order. The book sometimes uses a fancy letter, but that's pretty rare. Almost always we use 3 points. Some definitions. Collinear means points on the same line. Coplanar means points on the same plane. Some more definitions here. A segment, you have 2 points. Notice they're endpoints, and notice that the bar above doesn't have the little arrows because these things end at A and B. Notice the way this is written because you have to get this down. So a line has the little arrows on it, and a segment does not. You just put a bar over it. More about that later. An endpoint is a capital letter because capital letters are always points. So there's C and D. A ray has one endpoint and goes in the direction of another point. In this case, our ray goes in the direction of S, starts at R is the endpoint, and goes in the direction of S. The way you draw that arrow matters because it goes towards S and continues infinitely on that side. It begins at R is the endpoint. Opposite rays, we don't really talk about that much, but if they have a common endpoint, in this case E, then they're opposite rays. They have to be together, they make a line. A postulate. In geometry, postulates are statements that we have to assume to be true because they're obviously true. We say they're intuitive ideas, which means we understand them without an explanation. So like here, through any 2 points, there's exactly one line. It's not something we could prove. We like to prove things in geometry, but it's an obvious thing that can happen. Through any 2 points, there's a line. Through any 3 points that are non-collinear, they're not on the same line, you have one plane that goes through them. So these 3 points are in that one plane. If 2 points are in a plane, then the line would also be in that same plane, just like the coordinate plane. When you graph and you have 2 points and draw a line, that line is in the coordinate plane. They're in the same plane. They talk about the word intersection. That's when things connect. So like down here in this picture, this line and this line intersect at that point in the plane. We talk about intersection a lot. If 2 lines intersect, they intersect at exactly 1 point. Like in this picture, that point right there, those 2 lines intersect in. If 2 planes intersect, they intersect in a line. That's this picture right here. See the 2 planes and how they intersect in a line? So just take a look at these pictures and think about it. Notice the dotted line. That's because it's behind. You really can't see it. We show that it's behind by putting a dotted or dash line. Some of these pictures here are questions on the assignment, so you can refer back to this when you get to the assignment and you have a question. So very important here. Make sure you look this over carefully. Notice, again, the single lowercase letter, not a point. You can name a line that way. Notice the way the lines are drawn and the segments are drawn. You have arrows on the lines because they're infinite. Notice that usually a plane, we use 3 letters to name a plane. Make sure you go over the vocabulary, collinear and coplanar. And the idea, it could be non-collinear, non-coplanar, meaning it's not on the same line or not in the same plane. Make sure you're paying close attention to how you write things down, because when you go through the assignment, you've got to get it written down correctly or what you're saying is meaningless. Postulate's an important idea. It's a statement that is assumed to be true. They're obvious ideas, and that's why we call them postulates. They're not something we can prove. We like to prove things, but we can't prove a postulate. They do try sometimes with some postulates. And then these ideas here. So as you go, this is right out of the textbook. When you get your textbook, make sure you're reviewing the vocabulary and reviewing the main ideas.